everyone. Welcome back to another episode of our show. Today, we're talking about something that maybe you haven't been asked to examine before. You see, in most companies, really regardless of size, leave typically lands on one person. We all know that there is some sort of leave person within your organization, and they're the one person that holds the knowledge, the compliance tracking, and really everything in between. And that process tends to work until it doesn't. And whether that's because they're on a vacation or they move to another opportunity, or let's say they're on a leave themselves, it can create a big gap that needs to be filled if they're not there. So today, to help me unpack why leave can break down when one person holds it all together, I'm joined with Tilt's Employee Success Manager, Kim Smith. Kim, thanks for joining me once again on another great conversation.
Thanks for having me, Nick. I'm glad to be here. Always happy to be here.
Absolutely. So let's start really with picking the brain of someone who's in HR when it's just them. Can you walk me through what actually lives in the head of someone who's managing leave solely by themselves? The things really that, let's say, aren't documented anywhere, but somehow they're the ones that keep the process moving. What's living in their head?
Yeah. Oh, this is such a fun question. I love that we're starting with this one. Everything. Most of us HR folks, we love a good process. Unfortunately, some of those processes that we have don't always live on paper or in a Google document. They tend to live up here. And so for a lot of people, the full life cycle of how they manage a leave of absence does live in their head. What can be tricky about that scenario is, you already spoke to it, if somebody steps away for their own leave of absence or a vacation, what happens? And if somebody goes to pick up that workload or, to support the leave in replace of that person, that can lead to some tricky situations. I like to think of leave also as an ever-changing journey. So if you think of a decision matrix, if you will, depending on what's happening with the leave could lead to different actions that need to be taken throughout that. So that decision matrix also tends to live up in my brain anyway. As I'm supporting employees through that leave of absence, different things, whether it's an extension request or maybe they actually are able to return earlier, different things that are going to happen throughout the leave are going to trigger different actions that need to get taken. So unfortunately, for a lot of people, that is just something that's living in our HR and people teams' heads, and not necessarily on a document for people to reference. I actually can speak firsthand to that. In 2023, my team was preparing for my leave of absence. We were preparing to welcome my third child, and I was the person here on the team managing the leaves. And so I was tasked with kind of mapping out what that process looks like for my teammates, so that when I was out on my leave, they were able to seamlessly step in and follow those steps.
And it seems like, because if there's one person managing this whole entire process, there's also this perception that, well, if they can do that, then they can handle everything else. Right? There's this perception that if one person can handle it all, that the process is working flawlessly. And why can that actually be more of a hit and risk than anything else?
Yeah. I think anytime that you have one sole owner of something, it's a bit risky. Just because if that person, again, does step away, maybe they also decide that they're just ready for their new next and they move on from the company. We don't have that documentation anywhere, or at least a sole reference place to start on like what that process was. I think also anytime that you have one sole person being the owner, if that person steps away, would anybody else be able to come in behind them and flawlessly pick up the leave of absence that they were managing? And so I know for me, my approach to managing leave of absences is always just that all the notes that I'm adding into the system, all the way that I'm like staying organized with what I'm getting about the leave or the updates from the employee, would somebody behind me be able to look at that and know exactly what's going on, what conversations have happened, what details also have been shared with me so far throughout the leave. That's really important, just in case somebody else does need to step in and manage that, or I need to give a background on a leave of absence. I also know what other conversations have already occurred. So honestly, some of those notes and organization is actually for myself, just because we are, as HR folks, managing a lot of different things, not just leave.
Absolutely. And this is really where it shows how you manage leave can make all the difference, right? I'm thinking through, if there's a team of one that's managing leave completely manually, they're experience is going to be much, much different than someone that has a dedicated leave solution that can help have some of the work alongside them, to where if they need to take a leave of absence themselves, or if they need a vacation for a week, that they're not going to have to wonder if the leave process is going to be okay. Like, they know that there's still a dedicated team that's going to be able to keep things moving along and support them. So I would imagine from your end that that would make a meaningful difference.
And I will say that from what I understand, from our sales team speaking with potential customers and, now folks that are customers now, is that before Tilt, a lot of these teams did have that. They have a documented process. Some of them have a documented process that they were following, whether that is a checklist or some type of playbook that they're following to make sure that all of those to-do lists and important things and critical things that make up a leave are being taken care of. So I will say kudos to the folks that don't have a solution like Tilt yet, because they are managing them in-house right now. They're just looking for a better way to do that. But a lot of these
Mhm.
HR and people teams that are managing leaves manually do have something in place. And oftentimes it's a process that they've built from scratch. So good on them.
Yeah. And I think some people, when they hear of this discussion of leave breaking down, some people might hear this and think it's more of a smaller company issue with an HR team of one. But I feel like this can happen at larger organizations as well, or mid-sized organizations. Why does team size not actually protect an organization from this risk?
I think the obvious answer there is if you have a larger organization, you're likely going to see more leave numbers. So, more
Mm.
leave cases that you're managing, leaves that are in different stages, leaves multi state. I don't think that the size of an organization is going to impact that, hey, versus like a company that's like less than 100 employees. Because what also gets tricky is if you are an employer that has less employees, you may not see some of those more robust leave cases as often. Maybe you're not managing leaves for particular states that have state programs as often. And then you have to quick do a refresher because somebody in Washington requested a leave and it's been a year since you've managed a leave of absence. So I think, on both sides of the spectrum, it doesn't matter if you are supporting an employee population of 50 employees or less, or up to like 5,000, you're still going to feel those pain points. Yeah, and that's my experience too. I've managed leave of absences at larger companies than Tilt, and the pain points do still exist regardless of company size.
When you're at these bigger companies too, there's also the fact of, okay, people might be in multiple states. They might work from home. As you're
Yeah.
saying, there might be more exceptions or different cases or specialties that have to be addressed within this. And that's not even including all of the different leave laws that are constantly evolving and changing that have to get involved. So really, that just adds to the point of, even if you are at a larger organization that's not considered a small business,
Mhm.
you're still going to be impacted by that in some way, shape, or form. I'm curious too, let's say there's an HR leader who's listening to this interview and suspects that their organization is overly dependent on this one person. What is, let's say, a practical step moving forward that they can take to help reduce some of that risk that we've talked about?
First and foremost, start brain dumping all of that on a document. I know that that's hard, and I know as a smaller HR team that it's difficult at times to find the time to do that. But just start just dumping everything into a document. Organize later. AI is a wonderful tool for organization. You can dump all of that kind of day to day and what you're doing, and AI could completely spit you out, a process flow document that you can build upon and customize and make, feel more like home depending on your organization. I also am just going to come out and say it, schedule a demo with Tilt. If you are an HR individual or a people teams person and you're feeling like, there has to be a solution out there and you are ready to explore that, Tilt's a wonderful option for you, getting some support in knowing, how to manage the leaves, how to give your employees, a really great experience. I think is also what a lot of HR and people teams are after too. So yes, there's all
Mhm.
of, the logistics of organizing the leave, setting it up, the paperwork, but at least the HR and people teams that I have in my network genuinely want to give the employee a really great experience.